This is Sporting Life.
Well, welcome along to the Sporting Life Racing Podcast. David Orr, joined by Graham Cunningham, David Johnson and Billy Nash. This week, GC, you and I were at Aintree last Saturday for the Randox Grand National. It felt different. It looked different during the race. What were your key takeouts?
Hi, morning all. Yeah, it was different. And I suspect people might be getting towards the fill on the National, but there's only a couple of points I want to make. One of the great blessings of living in this country is that you can disagree with people and move on. It's fine. I didn't feel the same about this year's National as a lot of people, and that's no problem. Aintree should not base their policies on the future of the National judged on how much fun I'm having with the race as a 63-year-old person brought up on red rum, crisp and company. I didn't feel quite the same, but the important point I'd like to make, I think, lads, is that afterwards, forget the race itself, afterwards, that sort of sense of, how shall I say, borderline triumphalism with the Racing Post senior writer Lee Mottershead booming that we got the National we deserved. That left me feeling uneasy. Why? Well, because last year's Grand National winner, Korak Rambler, did a kamikaze act at the second fence. And if he'd succeeded, then the triumph would have been a disaster like that. And you can't keep dancing on the head of a pin with your most famous race. If there isn't a death, we win. If there is a death, you win, and hope that that event can thrive. So, you know, it was a fascinating event, all told. But you've asked me how I felt about the race, and I just didn't feel the same. I think, and this might be a good thing, it's just like the whip, lads, just like the whip. I think lots of us were adamant that, you know, they couldn't make this thing work with the whip. They have, and salute to the BHA on that. Salute to Aintree for producing a terrific racing surface. That staggered me how well the race is rode. And for a lot of people, that will be seen as a great thing for the National. If I don't agree, that's fine. I think we've lost something spectacular, something awe-inspiring, but maybe that's the way it needs to be.
David, Graham North in Watch and Learn met me the point that the Aintree factor is no longer relevant to the modern National. The horse with previous experience won't be required, judging by Am Maximus's round to win the race. What did you make of the National as a spectacle?
Yeah, I think as a spectacle, it was fairly enjoyable. You know, it's all a case of what do you want from your races, and I can sort of see both sides of that argument. You know, some people were getting abused for saying it wasn't like a National of old, you know, and Beecher's, you know, a fence like Beecher's really is a shadow of its former self, isn't it? And I get that people are saying that the race isn't as exciting as what it was from the jumping point of view. But then the other side of that coin is that it is a safer race, and that you do end up with, say, 16, 17 horses still in contention as they cross the Melling Road second time around. And from the once a year punter's point of view that would have still had a chance at that stage, their enjoyment of the race is going to be much more if they think they've still got a chance coming to the second last than if their horse has done a somersault on the first circuit. So it is what it is, isn't it? And the race doesn't necessarily have to suit the diehards that have grown up on the race over the last 20 years. And we've got lots of races throughout the season. If we don't like the National as it is, we'll just enjoy the other races, and we just have to put up with it, I guess.
Billy, the winner, Am Maximus, 167 plus, best time for winning performance in the Grand National of this century, and a horse that Willie Mullins thinks is a Gold Cup horse. Do you agree?
I think you'd have to be thinking in those terms with him. No, I'm not saying he will win a Gold Cup, but looking at his performance last weekend, it was fairly sensational, Dave, the way he managed to put that much distance between himself and the others from the last home. I was listening to, I thought it was very interesting what Paul Townend said in his interview before the race. Look, I was one of these people that didn't think Am Maximus would get around. I really thought his jumping would let him down there. But I was listening to Paul before the race, and he made the point. He said, look, if he gets over the first 3 or 4 and he gets into a rhythm, then I think he'll be fine. And I remember looking at him jumping at Beechers the first time, and he right down along the inside, and I kept an eye on him from there. And honestly, going out on the final circuit, I couldn't see any other horse winning it, even though there was loads in it. I just had a feeling all the way to the final circuit that Am Maximus was going to win this race. Par for maybe 2 seconds at the last where he jumped left and Manila Indo quick and clear, and I thought, oh, maybe he's just he won't be able to bridge that gap. But sure, bridge it he did, and then absolutely left him standing. I mean, it was an incredible performance to finish the way he did. He was like a fresh horse at the line. So massive, like 167 plus. To put that into context, in time form terms, the only horse to have posted a higher figure in a national since 1998 was Sunny Bay, who finished second off a mark of 170 and ran to a time form figure of 171. So Am Maximus is one of the best national performers of recent times. He's still young enough to think he could be competitive in a Gold Cup, but you know, as we have seen with the likes of Corach Rambler and Noble Yates, the Gold Cup is a totally different test, and whether he'll be quite classy enough to win one is another matter, but he's clearly a fantastic horse.
Yeah, we should mention he's had 2 digs at Galopin des Champs this winter, and he's got crushed on both occasions. It is an altogether different game, Bill, isn't it?
It is, and that's another interesting point you make, because just the way he's been campaigned would not be a typical Grand National campaign. You know, he won the Irish National last year. They brought him back. He was still a novice, so he won the Drinmore, beating a horse who has won 2 Grade 1s over 2 miles and finished second in the Arkle. Then he's running in the Savills, he's running the Irish Gold Cup, and he's running the Bobby Joe. So it's not as if they've been hiding him away and campaigning him just for one race like a lot of people do. I mean, he's been kept busy and he's been competitive in all those races. But yeah, it's another, like, 167. Galopin des Champs is 180 odd. So I mean, he has another stone or so to be considered a real live Gold Cup contender.
Just want to make a quick point on, sorry, Dave, on Paul Townend's ride, and it was a real ballsy effort to take him the route that he did. But I think it's something that if you're going to win a national nowadays, it's the way that you've got to do it. All those that, you know, it's obviously a smaller field nowadays. There's not going to be quite the carnage, hopefully, as what there has been in the years past. And all those that were sort of sitting at 5 and 6 wide, out of trouble, giving away lots of ground, they're just putting themselves at a huge disadvantage. Whereas Towning, he had Am Maximus saving ground the whole way, going the shortest route, and it was really impressive the way that he quickened away. Reminded me a little bit of Hedge Hunter. Do you remember when he won, obviously the second year after he'd fallen the first year? He quickened noticeably at the elbow, and you know, obviously he went on to finish second in a Gold Cup the year after. So yeah, there's no reason why Am Maximus shouldn't be running in the Grade 1s next season.
Yeah, that's a good point, David. I remember I was standing on the ground, you know, the lawn area, when Hedge Hunter charged up the running when he won his national, and thought, I'm not sure I've seen a horse come up the running like that in a national. And there was an element of that about Am Maximus at the weekend. Can I make one quick, more general point? You know, you asked me on here for frank opinions, and I wouldn't be true to myself if I didn't mention this, because I want to mention the topic that dare not speak its name for most media members, and it is the fact that we are on pace to lose half the national audience in TV terms in the space of a decade. Now, the Racing Post have done a straight news piece with Ed on this, and Ed aimed up as usual, but the numbers are startling. Perhaps it's poor promotion from ITV. I think there might be an element of that. I've said before that I know the people involved and I feel for them in that respect, and it's not their fault. There's randomness on this, but the steady decline is not being commented on in any way by the British racing media, and I have no idea why. Actually, I do have quite a good idea why. But that's a story for another day. But this is a significant downturn in people watching the Grand National. So let me ask you this: is the National a fading force with the British public, or is this bright new dawn, which some are heralding from the weekend, likely to result in a return to the good old days? But the British media are not commenting on this appreciable downturn in figures, and it's not a one-off.
I thought I had very few contacts from friends about the National this year. In fact, I didn't have any. You used to get WhatsApps galore in the build-up, etc., and people taking a casual interest in it just didn't seem engaged this year. Or I don't know if that's just a one-off or whatever, but the trend suggests otherwise, isn't it? Healthy numbers crowd-wise at Aintree, that was a positive, but that put through to the general sporting public, the viewers, it does seem to be an issue now for the National.
I might as well give you my theory on why the British racing media don't want to analyse this. I have a clear theory that they see terrestrial racing, ITV racing, as the last chopper out of Saigon. And if that goes down, then they go down. So this is a topic they want no part of. And
it's strange, isn't it, in terms of the enjoyment that people get from the National, David. You still see the sweepstake kits, you still see the things being produced to sort of promote the race, but the numbers just aren't there in terms of people watching it, or seemingly, I mean, our site traffic was good, but it's still not what it was sort of 10 years ago for the race.
No, it isn't. And I guess one of the things that we've got to view it in the context of is there is a huge change in the way that people consume their media, isn't there? You know, people will keep up in stuff on their phones. You know, not a lot of people watch TV in the way that we have always grown up watching TV. You know, streaming services via computers are a much more popular way of accessing stuff now rather than watching stuff as it happens. So I think potentially there's 3 or 4 factors that are all combining to bring the audience figure down, but it's certainly something that racing shouldn't be just saying, oh well, there's nothing to see here, it's nothing to worry about, because obviously that shop window that got so many of us into racing in the first place by seeing it on terrestrial TV, if that does disappear, then where is the next lot of fans going to come from? And you see it with other sports. I think of like boxing, cricket nowadays as well, that they're hardly ever seen on terrestrial TV. They're very much the preserve of the Sky Sports subscription model, and they just don't have the numbers that they used to.
But anyway, just go back, obviously challenges ahead there. Let's go back to the race itself, just fleeting. We talked about a new Grand National, felt different, and you've got a winner trained by Mullins beating Elliott, de Bromhead in third and Elliott fourth, and all horses with various level of Grade 1 form.
Yeah, I think that's the major point there, Dave. That if you like the cream rose to the top in this National, which doesn't always happen, you know, I don't think it's the lottery that it was before. It's not the kind of race where, you know, the plucky long shot who's a dour stare will, you know, might stay on into third or fourth. We thought that might happen this year because of the ground. Obviously, the ground wasn't anywhere near as bad as we expected it to be. But when you see the race, and when you see there were so many horses still involved crossing the Melling Road the second time, yet all the real class horses came to the fore, I think that's just the way we're going. That's just the way the National is going to be in the short term, I reckon. You know, it's clearly not the test it was before, but at the same time, I must say I thoroughly enjoyed it. I really enjoyed watching the race on Saturday. I didn't back the winner, of course, but that's a story for another day.
Quite logical, Billy, I suppose, that if the fences aren't taking as much out of runners on the way around, then the elite Grade 1 type of horses, in theory, ought to come to the fore. Would you agree with that?
Of course, yeah. And I suppose the fact that the field has been curtailed slightly down to 34, 32 as it was at the weekend, you know, you don't have the sort of no-hopers down at the bottom anymore that are getting in horses' way, you know. So I think it does stand to reason that the best horses will from now on, or at least in the short term, come to the fore in these races.
I didn't think it was less of a spectacle for the smaller field.
I didn't think so at all. No, not at all.
You think back to the days when Phil Smith was absolutely desperate for a horse to carry more than 11 stone to victory, and there they are, the first 4 all with 11 stone or more than 11 stone this year.
And yet,
what would he give Am Maximus next year, I wonder?
That would be unveiled by curtains, wouldn't it? If only he was owned by Gigginstown. But David, for the romantics, and there are a few still out there, Kitty's Light for that wonderful Victor Williams and his wonderful family ran such a huge race in 5th, and David Maxwell on 8th. Where was he last year? But if only he'd have been him last year, Billy. It would have been recouping the each way money in 6. So there were 1 or 2 nice stories scattered around the big guns.
Yeah, there were. Kitty's Light ran a cracker, just gone back up the handicap this year, hasn't it? And that's sort of done for him against a classier type. I'm sure he'll run well, you know, if he turns out in what I still think of as a Whitbread, and just been a great servant to connections, hasn't he?
Is there any chance of a justice each way payout for Mission fans, because he did pass the line in second place?
Oh, I didn't realise he was a loser. Oh, he should be, yeah. The very least a refund.
He didn't like it, did he? He didn't, even before he'd
No.
departed. He wasn't up for that job.
A bit like Panda Boy as well.
But it shows what a huge risk it is, isn't it? Running your whole season around one race that so much luck you still need, you know, never mind your handicap mark.
Now, if we were struggling following the action, just think about poor JP McManus trying to dissect what colour cat was where. Because I think it was about, I mean, I won't name the name, but a freelance commentator was calling Limerick Lace the winner on his commentary he was doing off the telly in the press room on Saturday. GC, JP, I mean, the biggest owner ever in the history of national hunt racing, incredible numbers over the year. Has there ever been a team like this in the green and gold?
No, probably no, definitely no. He had a Grade 1 treble on the Friday, which we'll come to in a moment. But no, his eyes must have been all over the show coming around the bend, because he definitely had 5 still with live chances, I think, coming around the home turn. I don't know whether he had a bet in the race, but I suspect next year, and we'll come on to them one by one, hurdlers and chasers, but especially young chasers coming through, he has never been more stacked than he has at the moment.
That's a perfect segue. Let's move in. Now, a horse that I've called the wrong name all year, it transpires. I hadn't read the name carefully enough. I know the way you're thinking, Billy Nash. Grade 1 winner at Aintree, having been a handicap blot at Cheltenham. Is he going to jump well enough to make his mark in the Open Company?
That is the $64,000 question with him, Dave, isn't it? He was better this week than he was at Cheltenham. It didn't take him quite so long to warm to his task, but at the same time, you know, smaller field, his jumping didn't come under as much pressure. He took his form up another small little notch. He didn't have to probably improve massively. He's now got a time form rating of 158p. That leaves him with plenty to find if he's going to be competitive in those major open races next year. And just looking at him, I think maybe he's a horse for the Grand National. I mean, I know his jumping is a question mark, but I certainly think the trip won't be any issue to him. And I think if he was mine, that's the way I'd be tempted to go with him. But I think he probably deserves, look, he's a Grade 1 novice chase winner, so they'll have to have a crack at a Grade 1 with him. But I think he might end up a national horse.
GC, we know he's a Grade 1 winner. Factor File, a Grade 1 winning novice chaser for JP, and Corbett's Cross, who went into Open Company himself and emerged with plenty of credit in that bowl.
Ran really well. Spillans Tower's another one next year. I'm sure I've missed at least one. Corbett's Cross ran a belter. I think, I don't know what you lads think, pretty much all the races last week, I think jockeys rode very sensibly to the conditions. And that placed a premium on, in relative terms, a finishing kick, and not quite as high premium on jumping as normal. And I think that helped the likes of I Know the Way You're Thinking. That race at Limerick over Christmas, it was a big news line at the time, wasn't it, for the little stramash between Patrick and Danny. But Gaelic Warrior beats Elite Tomp, beats I Know the Way You're Thinking, and they've won Britain's pretty much 3 biggest novice chases in the spring.
We're going to come back to the bottom. I'm just going to keep the JP McManus thing going. David, Mystical Power. Willie just seemed absolutely torn afterwards because he doesn't think he's a champion hurdle horse. Doesn't think he'll make an open ager. Might be a novice chaser, but wouldn't make a Grade 1 chaser. In his column with us on Monday, he was thinking switching into the flat because he thought he could make up into a cup horse. If they went down the flat route, he could be a horse who might just make up into a cup horse on the flat. Willie doesn't know where to go with him. Where would David Johnson if he was the new Frank Berry?
I like the idea of going back on or going to the flat with him. Obviously not back on the flat yet. You know, he's got that pedigree to make a half decent flat horse, hasn't he? Being by Galileo, obviously, and Annie Power. She never ran on the flat, obviously, did she? But she was flat bred pretty much, wasn't she? She was by Scirocco herself, and you can see the way that he goes. What he brings to the table should make him fully effective back in some decent flat handicaps where they go a proper gallop over 1.5 miles and upwards. You know, he's a real strong traveller, and I think that's sort of one of the things when you look at his novice hurdle campaign. he's only raced on soft and heavy ground, and surely the talents that he brings are going to be seen to much better effect when there's less dig in the ground. So I'd like to see a little bit of drying ground. Maybe they'll be tempted to go to Punchestown, and maybe we'll see how good he is, because I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. And whether they do go back on the flat, it's just unfortunate that he's obviously not got a handicap mark to work with yet, has he? You know, they'd have to get him a mark, and then you sort of, it's going to take long enough to get the mark, and then you're talking towards the end of the season rather than being able to get him ready to roll straight away and target one of the big races at Royal Ascot.
I think he's like his mum, Annie Power, in that he's good, not world class, but he's very good. But he's not like his mum in that she didn't hang around when she hit the front, she powered on. But I think he only just does enough when he hits the front, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Could have 3 quick runs at Dundalk over 7, get an handicap mark for that golden horse, couldn't it? I mean, that's an option. But really, it did strike me that if he was in any other hands, Mystical Power, then you would be thinking of a champion hurdle campaign, wouldn't you? You Skybet Supreme, he looked all over the winner for 4 or 5 strides after the last in deep ground. He's won the Grade 1 at Aintree. He's come a long way in a very short time. It just seems a shame that that's seemingly ruled out so quickly.
He's not the only horse you could say that about, though, Dave. There are plenty of other horses that you could say if they were trained in any other yard bar Willie Mullins. Take Lossiemouth, for example. You know, she would have been a champion hurdle horse this year, you'd imagine. So, yeah, I think my own hunch is that they'll probably stick to hurdles with him for the time being. He doesn't look to me, now I haven't seen him in the flesh, but just looking at him on TV, he doesn't look like your typical chaser.
No,
so I think they might give him another campaign over hurdles. The flat option, it's always there, but I think a little bit like Constitution Hill last year, I think they might, you know, I can't see them doing it this time around. Maybe next year, but we'll see. And I don't know, maybe they'll try and stretch him out and trip. Annie Power stayed quite well, so there's no reason why he won't go another half a mile at least, you know, so that will give him a few options. But as things stand, he has a way to go to be a champion hurdle horse.
Dave, I know you love a good segue.
Love a segue, JC.
Round the table for next year, just for next year's achievements, if you could be the owner of Mystical Power or Sagino, which way would you go?
Mystical Power for me.
Would you?
Yeah, I think I'd be the same. Yeah.
On the hope that he does go hurdling and that we're not running 3 times at Dundalk.
Well, the thing about Sagino is, you know, you'd think being in the Henderson stable, he's going to go where Constitution Hill doesn't go. So he's got loads and loads of options.
Well, the problem is he should have a fighting fifth out the running, shouldn't there? Be no Christmas hurdle for him. So I don't know where Hendo would go about those 2, because I don't think he's ever gone anywhere else with any champion hurdle horse in his hand.
I say it's not like you can take him to Ireland, is it? Because he'd run into State Man in the same owners. So
yeah. Well,
also
Sagino,
to be an away game.
They both have to jump up, don't they? Sagino is 153p time form. Mystical Power is 151, not with a P. So, you know, there is a gap that both those horses have to bridge to get in amongst the big lads.
What did you make of Sagino at Aintree, GC?
I thought he's solid. He was untidy at the last couple, but we know that Cargesi was a bit too free. We know that she's a really good guide to the best juvenile form, and he beat her really decisively by a very similar margin to Majbra. So Majbra, Cargesi and Sagino are the pick of the juveniles, but none of that bunch has established a real claim to being a 170 standard hurdler just yet.
Billy, Cargesi very, very free again. There's an engine there, isn't it? They can get it channeled in the right direction.
There absolutely is, yeah. She's a bit like Gallimar So last year. She was very, you know, same colours, just too keen for her own good. And again, like looking at her last week, there was certainly a point during that race where I thought she was going to win, just like the Triumph Hurdle. I thought she had it in the bag. I didn't think Sergino would be able to bridge the gap. And I think it was a combination of him staying on well and she just emptying because she had been too free in the early stages. If they can get her to channel that energy, then there's definitely a good mare in there. And she's actually one that I wouldn't mind seeing back in the flat, because I think she has loads of speed, and I'd be very interested if they did consider a flat campaign with her.
I imagine it's probably on the radar somewhere. Willie does seem to think that way now, doesn't he? Increasingly, David John Bond, I don't think will be on the flat. He might be at Sandown. He might be at Punchestown. We saw him over 2.5 at Aintree, and he got the job done.
Yeah, exactly. And he certainly had the battle. I know some people have wondered at times what he can really do when it comes to the crunch. But you couldn't sort of knock the way that he found, did he? You know, Conflated and Protector at both horses with plenty of stamina themselves that you know, weren't typically tend to find for pressure as well. So yeah, it's just one of them. You can't help but think what might have been had he been able to have run in that champion chase, given how that unfolded. You know, they might have missed the best opportunity for him to win a real big race with that one. But yeah, I'm sure he'll go to Sandown for the 2 miler there, and we might yet get that El Fabiolo match up with obviously the Trainers' Championship being up for grabs.
Hell of a card at Sandown next Saturday, couldn't it? But Punchestown, I mean, Willie'll still win the Grade 1s at Punchestown, won't he, Billy? It depends which, if he sends the A-listers or sort of top of the B-listers over to Sandown. It'd be fascinating to see. We will talk Trainers' title in a little bit. GC, I want to go back to that bowl. Jerry Colomb wins. His record, bar up against Galloping de Champ, it stands up to the closest of inspection.
Yeah, it's a smashing horse, Jerry. I don't think he had to reproduce his Gold Cup rating to win that race, but again, it was a tactical contest. He's not cement-footed at the moment, Ahoy Senor. He ran a belting race, had the run of it, but jumped really well, battled on, and Jerry got himself out of a pocket, stayed on willingly, and got the job done. So in a tactical race, he did what he had to do. He's almost certainly going to take the same route as next year, down Royal, etc. And he's got 3.5 lengths to make up on Galopin de Champ on Gold Cup form. So he's a really high-class, likeable horse. He's never run a bad race in his career. And we should tip our hats to Elliott, Gordon Elliott, who produced his horses right through the week at Liverpool in terrific condition. Just checked. I think he's won 10 Grade 1 races this season on both sides of the Irish Sea. I didn't have the time. I was going to go and try and work out how many he would have been had Mullins got a 12-month ban for being too good. But it would be an enormous number because he's run up behind Mullins' aces time and time again. But in Jerry Colomb, he's got a genuine Gold Cup horse. In Teopu, he's got the preeminent staying hurdler at the moment. In Brighter Days Ahead, more on her in a minute. He's got a terrific filly on his hands. Firefox, etc., found a 50. So, he's in second place, but it's a very, very honourable second.
GC mentioned Ahoy Senor, Billy, ran a cracker. He said we touched on Corbett's Cross. A couple of British horses who potentially didn't quite come up to expectations. Shishkin, we saw to Mr. Gold Cup, finished 4th there, beaten, sort of going to between the last two, it was clear it wasn't going to be his day. Nico de Boinville and got off and said, we're going to Ireland now. I mean, I don't know if that means for a summer holiday or if he's heading to Punchestown. Where are you now with Shishkin? It seems to be a weekly poll. I'll put it on the poll. But where are you with Shishkin right now, Billy Nash?
That's a good question, Dave. I don't know, to be honest. I wasn't all that keen on him at Cheltenham. I didn't think 3 miles and 2 at Cheltenham was going to suit him. I thought the ground would go against him at Aintree, and actually the ground wasn't too bad. So you couldn't really use that as an excuse. And the way the race was run should have suited Shishkin probably better than anything else in the race. Because as GC said, it was a relative test of speed. I mean, Jerry Colomb overcame it. Ahoy Senor was perfectly positioned, but it's the kind of race that should have suited Shishkin. We know how good he was in the contest last year. So look, he's 10 years old. I just wonder, have we seen the best of him at this point? I think his best days might well be behind him. We know he has his quirks, and he does tend to throw in the odd bad run here and there anyway. But I'm just wondering if maybe the best days of Shishkin are gone. I might be all wrong, but I can't see him being massively competitive in those top races anymore. For instance, like he was unlucky not to win the King George this year, perhaps. I wonder if John Bond will go to the King George next year. I think certainly if he was mine, I'd be very tempted to go down that route with him. And, where do you go with Shishkin then? I don't know.
I think that's the point with him, isn't it? He's at that stage where there's no point minding him. You may as well go to Punchestown with him. He's 10 now, turning 11 next year. His best chance is obviously going to be, I'm saying you could see why he's going to Punchestown, but his best chance is going to be avoiding the Irish, isn't it? Betfair Chase, probably the one to circle for a starting point next year and hope for the best there.
GC, in 6 Brave Man's Game, it's been a bit of a dull season in the Envy, and they put cheek pieces on. Ben Linford made the point, Nichols' record's deadly with cheek pieces on Grade 1 horses, and it didn't work with this fellow.
No. Paul is adamant that the really soft ground in the suit, and said very quickly that they're going to treat his wind again over the summer and hope that next winter they get a better ground winter. But no, Shishkin, Brave Man's Game, etc. That we know how good they are now, and if the aces deliver, then they're going to be playing for places by and large. I think we should definitely touch on the big hurdle on Thursday and the Stewards inquiry, which had multiple layers of intrigue.
I mean, I generally don't know where to start with that one. I know
Billy was happy with it. I know that.
Yeah. Billy got back GC less so. I've got to go for David first for a simply neutral view on the race. Imperial passed first past the post, and despite what plenty of people thought, the full ITV panel, Ruby Walsh, etc., thought the expulsion tool was coming. It didn't get brandished. What did you make of the decision, David?
I can sort of see why they've left this alone, but if they'd have changed it, I could have fully seen why they did it. I think it's one of those cases where if you're reasonably cogent and able to form an argument, you can make the case fairly well for why what decision was made. And for me, I think Imperial Pass was fortunate to keep the race. I don't think he would have kept the race had Bob Ollinger not finished second. I think if it had been a straight fight out between Imperial Pass and Langadan, first and second, I think they would have reversed them. Bob Ollinger ended up complicating things, and I presume the stewards decided that they didn't want to really promote him when he didn't really deserve to be finishing first. But that was a cracking race to watch, and the real interesting thing, how great to see Bob Ollinger really putting his head down and battle, and fair play to Henry de Bromhead for how he's turned that horse's career back round, given how it looked the way it was going.
Well, we jumped on Billy Nash's boom tweets early in the piece, didn't we? We managed to wean him off, and I didn't think he could top it. But when you've had a good bet on the Stewards inquiry and then it doesn't go your way, and Billy comes straight in with a "well done to all concerned" tweet, it's really not what you want to hear at all. Now, I don't think this was a horrific decision. I think it was a poor one, but there are always receipts these days. And the Stewards report on this is interesting, and I was dying to see it. And I maintain that there are three issues with it. First of all, why in the world did it take them so long to call an inquiry? Unreal. But this is from the official inquiry, lads. Imperial Pass shifted left-handed, taking Skelton, Langadan, slightly off his intended line. That wasn't slight. It was not slight. However, the stewards were satisfied that Imperial Pass was clear when crossing Langadan. Yeah, about half a length clear. And this is the topper, and that Langadan appeared to lose no momentum from the carry. In my view, all those statements are very questionable. The most key point of all here, was there interference? Yes. Who caused it? Imperial Pass caused it to Langadan. Langadan was gaining hard at the line, and the difference in time between those two horses was 0.02 of a second. So I think David summed it up perfectly. I think the presence of Bob Ollinger in the middle complicated things enough for them to say, well, we'll let this sleeping dog lie. But no, it was an awkward one. That it wasn't a good start to the week. I backed an 8-1 and a 7-1 winner on the Thursday and lost on the day. That takes some doing.
It's a cautionary tale there, listeners. Just listen to this and soak it in. And it's also complicated for Dan Skell as well, in that he's now got the appeal process is difficult. You see, well, the big swing around in the trainer's title, but they're not going to throw Bob Ollinger out. So you're potentially getting your prize money up from third to second. And also, Billy, how on earth do you get back down to 141 for next year's Cobble Cup from here with Langadan?
That is the question, Dave. I mean, what could have been with Langadan? I mean, you look at the way he runs there and you're kind of thinking, why has he not been campaigned in these races for the last couple of seasons? Because surely he'd have picked up one of them. Yeah, he ran a belter. I thought, look, it shouldn't have any bearing on the outcome. I thought absolutely the best horse won. I think Imperial Pass, I thought he pulled himself up once he got to the front and travelled like a really good horse through the race. I think in the Stewards inquiry, the fact that Harry Skelton never stopped riding. Maybe if he'd put his stick down or changed his hands or something, it might have had an impact. But DJ got it right. The fact that Bob Ollinger finished second, they were never. I don't think they really could alter the result. The way the horses finished. I mean, we see it all the time. I'm not saying that's the correct thing. I mean, I'd be all for if you cause interference to a horse, you should be put behind it the way they do it in the States. But I certainly wasn't in this instance because I really wanted Imperial. I passed the ball down to the race.
Well,
So yes, I thought they did a great job.
well done to all concerned.
I thought the interference, it was quite similar to what we saw in the 4-year-old hurdle there a couple of years ago, wasn't it? Between Night Salute and Pied Piper. And when it only involved the 2 horses, it was a fairly straightforward task for them to just split them. Whereas, like I say, I think they were just happy to leave it as was.
Billy, I preferred the boom tweets to that one. That was it was a dagger. Well done to all concerned.
Yeah, I was surprised there was no comeback from that one. I was expecting something back.
Three will have been deleted before you count to 10. Now, Billy, it's obvious the British have dominated the Mares Novice Hurdle division this season. Got a great golden ace. Brighter days ahead. Second to her at Cheltenham, well beaten second. Very impressive at Aintree on Saturday in the Open Company over 2.5.
She certainly was. Yeah, she looked. I mean, Elliot has been telling us all year how good he thought she was, and she absolutely looked it this weekend. There was a really impressive performance. Now, it's entirely possible 1 or 2 in behind. Certainly the Mullins pair probably underperformed a small bit, but even still, she'd probably have won. She was really deeply impressive. I don't think at any point through the race, if you backed her, did you think she was going to get beaten? And she appeared to win with loads in hand. So she's a very, very talented mare. I think stepping back up in trip was a big key to her. I certainly think the 2 miles at Cheltenham was a big issue for her, and she's better going that sort of trip. It'll be interesting to see what they do with her now. She has the size and scope of a chaser, but you'd have to think that she's got so many options if they keep her the hurdles. Now her rating is low enough. She's got a time form rating of 139p, which even if you look at next year's Mares Hurdle, Lossiemouth is currently 154, so she will need to improve quite a bit. But certainly she's just even to look at her from her physique, there's more developing to do there. You'd think she'll improve another bit, and she's going to be really competitive in those Grade 1 races. I assume they'll keep her the hurdles, but she does have the option of chasing if they want to go down that route.
It feels like a bit of a shame if she's kept against fillies next season, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now that she's proved herself against useful boys, she has that potential to be really, really good. Her slightly older half brother, Will Potter, was a withdrawal. Shame on anyone who says that was a tactical retreat. I'm sure he had a slight setback, but maybe we'll get the chance to see them at some point in the future.
I think Paul Nichols, I think it was Nick Luck, well, it would be Nick Luck Daly. Punchestown, I think potentially for Colbert Potter, but Paul is inclined to pull up stumps for the season. So watch this space with
There's nothing left to prove.
Nothing left to prove.
He's still acclimatising.
Still acclimatised up the hill. You won't believe how fat he was. But no, that's not that one, is it? Different horse. Sorry, different horse. One man who has got something new to prove, GC, the Grand National Press Conference in the Media Centre, you very rarely get many nuggets in there. But Willie Mullins sipping water and champagne, deep in thought about the Trainers' Championship, talk about following in Vincent O'Brien's footsteps, something he'd never done, etc. We've only got sort of 10 days left of this season, but it does add a new dimension to that, particularly Perth and Sandown next week.
It does. I think I know who's the best trainer this season, but it's decided on money. So it will make it interesting. We won't see the old pipey days of running, horses 3 times in 4 days and what have you. So good luck to all of them. It's a very interesting angle for people who like that sort of thing. I want to mention one other horse that was a little more under the radar, but it feeds into the Nichols title bid, which is still alive. Sombui on day 1 with Bryony Fost. I thought that was the most vibrant jumping display of the entire week, and she can get her horse to jump. Have a look at Graham North's column this week about the fluency of riders and getting chasers round without mistakes, and she is right up there. And having won really impressively at Aintree, he's entered at Ayr this weekend, and he looks made for winging around £10 higher. But I hope we see him at Ayr, and I would like to think that Frosty can keep the ride.
Criminally underused, isn't she? Billy, There's Cheltenham, there's Ayr. There's every chance by Sandown Willie won't be in form. Just looking at the sort of races that there are next week, obviously he's got the Bet365 team. There's that Celebration Chase. El Fabiolo might potentially get rerouted from Punchestown. That
How
select.
about Gaelic Warrior for Sandown?
Oh, there's a sight, isn't it? That's a great.
Mm.
I mean, they're going for it. So you presume there's going to be a surprise A-lister or two on the ferry or plane to Isha.
Well, without Jumper, the British 2 mile chase isn't no good, are they?
No.
Yeah.
No, it's there for the taking, isn't it? It could be any one of 4, really, but you presume you'll get. It'd be great to be Gaelic Warrior. But when you put into context the achievement, it is ridiculous. It's decided on prize money, and try to explain that to somebody. When your champion jockeys who rides most winners, but your champion trainer is a guy who earns most prize money. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But for Willie, the thing that seemed to excite Willie was that Vincent O'Brien, the fact he's who stops you following him.
Yeah, I suppose it's similar to what we've been talking about on the flat during the summer with, Coolmore and Augusta Rodan and possibly going for Breeders' Cup or Classics and all this sort of stuff. It's, he's done pretty much everything there is to do in the sport now. So he's trying to do a little bit extra. And I suppose this is the one burning ambition of his that, it's something that you're not often going to get a chance to do it. And obviously Vincent O'Brien, an absolute legend of the game, as the last Irish-based trainer to do it. I mean, yeah, I can see why he would like to give it a right good go, and it looks like he will. His loads entered certainly at Ayr over the weekend. It'll be really interesting to see what he does bring to Sandown next week. But like you said, there's bound to be at least an A-lister, but even Willie's B-listers would be A-listers in other stables. So, I mean, whatever he brings over is going to be very competitive. It's not like he doesn't have the strength and depth to do it. So, yeah, it adds a fascinating dimension to next week, because after the Grand National, certainly I've always felt the British jump season, it kind of peters out a small bit. I know there are a couple of big races, but I think the fact that you have Skelton, Nichols and Willie going for a Trainers' Championship, it certainly will keep the interest up next week, and it's good for the game, I think.
And it's about legacy when you get that good, isn't it? And it's about the O'Brien thing and chasing a spectacular achiever like that. And you think, well, if not now, then when? So he'll be very keen to finish the job now.
I think that's the interesting thing this sector. I don't think it has really been a burning ambition throughout the season. It's literally only a case of realizing I'm in this position now, I can do it. And that's sort of what's sort of quite funny about it is 2 blokes that have been going at it hammer and tongs all season, both pretending it doesn't really matter to them when it does. And they're probably going to be picked by a guy that just thought 5 days ago, you know what, it's on.
That's another interesting point. How many winners has Paul Nichols trained in Britain this year?
More than Skelton, and it's got a better strike rate as well than Skelton. He's in front on the other measures, I think. PFM.
But it's about actually I probably have it here. Nichols has 124 winners trained in Britain this year. Willie is closing in on 250 in Ireland.
Really?
Which, yeah, he's 243 as of yesterday. So that just goes to show what a phenomenal trainer he is at the moment.
And yet his jockey might not be champion jockey in Ireland, Billy Nash.
It's possible. I think he probably still will be, but we have, for a change, a fascinating Jockey Championship bubbling away in Ireland. Jack Kennedy currently leads. Jack Kennedy's ridden 117 winners this season, which is by far and away his best season. Obviously, he's been interrupted by injury the last couple. Just looking back, since 2000, 117 would have won the Irish Jockeys Championship, all bar 6 years, I think. Paul is currently on 113. He's chasing him hard. But the interesting point about it, Jack Kennedy has ridden 10 winners for outside trainers. How many has Paul Townend ridden?
Less than 5.
Less than 5. A big fat 0. He has ridden 113 winners, all of them trained by Willie Mullins. He's only taken 8 outside rides for the entire year, and I can guarantee, I'd say at least 6 of them have come in the last 2 weeks. So, phenomenal championship bubbling under. Now, Jack will probably need to be somewhere in the region of 8 to 10 winners clear come Punchestown, because we know Paul will probably clean up there. So it's likely that he will win, but it's still a phenomenal competition. And the fact that the 2 of them have those sorts of figures to their names, like I said, I mean, Paul he's going for his 6th champion jockey title in a row. 113 winners is the highest total he has ever ridden. And, Jack Kennedy is currently ahead of that and probably won't end up winning it, which is, it's pretty hard to fathom, I suppose,
Paul, if you do need an agent for the last 3 weeks, I am available. 10% of all Punchestown winnings is all I require. Just Willie's got the number. You know where I am. David, it's the Craven meeting. It's the Greenham Fred Darling. I think it's not even called it anymore, obviously. But at Newbury, it's classic trial season in the UK. It's windy. It's wet. It's early spring. Are we going to see anything significant, do you think, at HQ or at Newbury?
Well, I think it's a case of just sort of getting there gradually, aren't we? I know you say it's windy and wet, but I think gradually it is drying out a little bit, isn't it? And we're talking good ground at Newmarket, and I think the Craven is fairly interesting in terms of what we're dealing with. We've got the third horse from the Dewhurst, haven't we? Who's in the Craven, Ebin Shadid, or Ebin Shaddad. But interestingly, looking at the early betting, he's only third favourite. I think favourite is Native Approach, who is the Charlie Appleby horse. And he's got a fair bit to find on form, but you would expect that because he's only had 2 runs on the all-weather, won a maiden last time. But I just think, given what we know, what his stablemate did and what he's rated, notable speech for his win at Kempton the other day, it's really interesting that they're putting this horse in at this level. And you'd love to know what Charlie thinks there is between the two of them, but he's not going to have it all his own way, because there's this Alcantor in there of Andre Forbes, who was runner-up at Saint-Cloud in the Criterium International last year. That was a Group 1. He didn't really settle that day. It was softish ground, and you could definitely see him improving under these quicker conditions. And going quite close today, but he doesn't currently have a 2,000 guineas entry. That could obviously change if he was really impressive, but let's be honest, the 2,000 guineas at this stage, it is very much a case of City of Troy's to lose.
I'm quite intrigued by the fact that Alcantor isn't favourite, with his solid group race form, and he's a smooth traveller with a turn of foot. Looking forward to seeing him. Is Native Approach, is the Godolphin horse? I felt sure they must have had one called out already. He looks an absolute specimen in physical terms. When you watch, he looks like twice as big as the horses around him in his Kempton win. And the fact that he's in the Craven after just a maiden win suggests that they think a lot of him. So it should be informative, but lots of people will be watching this Ebin Shaddad with the hood for the first time, seeing whether he's going to polish the City of Troy form. If he were to win the Craven handsomely, then the shears would be out for City of Troy's Guineas prize.
Oh, we'll be getting some belting quotes in the build-up to that, no doubt. Look forward to it. Billy, we've got this Covell Scottish Grand National, part of this title. I think Willie's got 6. McDermott suddenly found himself, seemingly not from nowhere, but from left field slightly into clear favouritism. Would he be a horse that would scream Scottish National to you?
He's certainly he's going in the right direction, Dave. He's a bit of a slow burner, McDermott. Took him a long time to win a race over hurdles. It took him just as long to win a race over fences, but he was very impressive at Fairyhouse. First try over 3 miles in a handicap at the Fairyhouse Easter meeting. Now, what was significant about that performance on the day was Paul Townend chose not to ride him. He was at the meeting, but it was Danny Mullins rode him, because in his 2 previous runs, McDermott, he'd fallen heavily at Limerick, and Paul had ridden him the time before, where he finished, I think, second in the beginner's chase, but he'd made a couple of fairly significant errors on the way around. Now, he jumped better at Fairyhouse, going a bit slower up to 3 miles. And I certainly think the trip at the weekend won't be an issue for him. The way he finished off that race, he was really strong at the finish. So I could see him getting 4 miles. But I think his lack of experience, combined with the fact that he does tend to belt the odd fence in a big field like that, I think he'll be too short for me, Dave. I think he'll probably be overbet in the race. Now, he could turn up and run really well, but it might come a year too soon for him. I was certainly thinking that maybe he'd be one for one of the bigger handicaps at Punchestown this year. But, I can see him running in those races next year, but this might just be a year too soon, I reckon.
No, David, it's not a year too soon for betting the Spring Mile. Is it the Spring Mile? What do they call the Newbury race?
The Spring Cup.
Spring Cup, there you go. I knew it was a Doncaster, the Spring Mile. The Spring Cup, not the Sprint Cup. The Spring Cup. You've got one for us. And loyal listeners will know it already.
Well, exactly, yeah. We talked after the Lincoln about there's quite an eye-catcher in there, and it was that Thunderball of Paul and Oliver Coles, who it was difficult conditions in the heavy ground at Doncaster for the Lincoln. Front runners, those up near the pace, they got very little shelter from the headwind, and Thunderball was one of those that showed up really well for a long way in the Lincoln. And I think both myself and GC pointed to him, and I think Ed did as well. And I was there thinking I was going to be over bet next time then. But, because if we could spot it, there's a good chance everybody spotted it, basically. And that doesn't appear to have been the case. I think he's about 14-1 looking at the prices in the week. And Paul and Oliver Cole, they had a 2-year-old that won at Newmarket yesterday, and Oliver was interviewed. He said very much the plan that he's going to run. Alec Wojciechowski is jocked up again already. So it does look all systems go. And about 14-1, I'll certainly be giving him another chance, because he's got some really good form from last year, and the Lincoln run definitely is one to be upgrading.
3 words, 1 point win there. Almost win the podcast. Last word to you, GC. It's obviously it's a great day Saturday. You've got the good flat racing at Newbury, good jumps racing. How do you play? Do you try to keep it across both spheres at this time of year, or do you?
That's a good question. Just about the time available. I generally I tend to start with the really good races and try to work my way out depending on how much time there is. But just to round things off, we started on an unusual note, introspection, read the National. It's a fantastic game when you see, the quality and the storylines, the people, the horses, etc. When high class flat is just getting going, and high class jumps is still, very much on the front burner. It is a terrific sport, and it's like I said, it's okay to disagree, and the National is always going to be a real bone of contention. So no, I can't wait for the next few weeks. It's a terrific time of year.
Really is. We'll be back next Wednesday to look back on what's gone on this weekend, ahead to the jumps finale at Sandown week after Punchestown and the Guinness Festival. My goodness, what it really is. Rolls on, the greatest of games. Thanks to GC, to Billy, and to DJ, and best of luck with your own bets this weekend.
Download the Sporting Life app for the best racing coverage, including live racing blogs, fast results, stable tours, trainer and jockey interviews, expert opinion, and tips.